Do you know how ancient philosophy still shapes our modern world? Welcome to BM Research, where we explore the fascinating stories of human evolution, ancient cultures, and pivotal historical events. Join us as we uncover the wisdom of the past and its lasting impact on today's society. Part 1. Early Life and Education. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in the small town of Stagira, a coastal settlement in northern Greece. His father, Nicomachus, was a physician who served King Amyntas of Macedon. This connection to the Macedonian court played an important role in Aristotle's early exposure to the intellectual and political climate of the time. Nicomachus, as a physician, would have been well versed in early forms of science and medicine. It is likely that this exposure to medicine and observation of the human body sparked an early interest in scientific inquiry for the young Aristotle. Aristotle's early education, although not much is documented, must have been deeply influenced by his father's profession. However, Aristotle lost both of his parents at a young age, and his guardian, Proxenus of Atarneus, took over his upbringing. At the age of 17, Aristotle was sent to Athens to study at Plato's Academy, which was the most prestigious center of learning in Greece. The academy was founded by Plato, the great student of Socrates, and was known for its rigorous intellectual environment. Aristotle would remain there for 20 years, first as a student and then as a teacher. At Plato's Academy, Aristotle was introduced to a wide range of subjects. Plato's teachings were deeply rooted in the idea of the existence of a realm of ideal forms, which he believed were more real than the material world. These forms were perfect, eternal, and immutable, while the physical world, according to Plato, was merely a shadow of this ideal realm. Aristotle was initially influenced by these teachings, but over time, he began to develop his own ideas that differed significantly from Plato's. While Plato focused on the abstract and metaphysical, Aristotle leaned toward the empirical, believing that knowledge came from experience and observation of the natural world. This divergence would later define his philosophical stance. While at the Academy, Aristotle also engaged with a variety of other intellectual pursuits. He studied not only philosophy but also subjects like mathematics, astronomy, and biology. The Academy encouraged critical thinking and debate, allowing Aristotle to sharpen his analytical skills and broaden his intellectual horizons. His time at the Academy laid the foundation for his future work and philosophical inquiries. The relationship between Plato and Aristotle was complex. While Aristotle greatly respected Plato as his teacher, their intellectual differences became more pronounced over time. Plato's idealism contrasted with Aristotle's emerging belief in the importance of the physical world and empirical evidence. This philosophical divergence eventually led to Aristotle establishing his own school and philosophy. Part 2. Plato's Influence and Divergence. As Aristotle spent more time at Plato's Academy, the differences between his emerging philosophy and Plato's idealism became more evident. Plato's doctrine of the forms, which posited that true knowledge could only be attained by contemplating the eternal and unchanging world of ideas, did not fully resonate with Aristotle. For Plato, the material world was a mere reflection of the ideal realm, and the senses were unreliable in providing true knowledge. Aristotle, however, began to challenge this notion. He believed that while the senses could be deceptive, they were still essential for gathering information about the world. Knowledge, in Aristotle's view, had to begin with what could be observed and experienced. He believed that by studying the natural world, one could uncover the principles governing it. Aristotle's disagreement with Plato's forms became one of the key philosophical differences between them. While Plato argued that the ideal forms existed independently of the objects in the material world, Aristotle contended that the essence of things, their form, was inherent in the objects themselves. According to Aristotle, it was unnecessary to posit the existence of a separate realm of forms. Instead, he believed that the principles governing the natural world could be understood through careful observation and logical reasoning. Aristotle's commitment to this more empirical method of inquiry would shape much of his later work. Despite these differences, Aristotle continued to respect Plato's contributions to philosophy. He recognized the importance of Plato's ideas in shaping the intellectual climate of the time. However, Aristotle's own thinking was moving in a different direction. After Plato's death in 347 BCE, Aristotle left the Academy. Some scholars suggest that Aristotle's departure may have been motivated by his growing dissatisfaction with Plato's successors at the Academy, who were more committed to Plato's idealism. Others believe that political factors played a role, particularly Athens' hostility toward Macedon, where Aristotle had strong connections. In any case, Aristotle's departure from Athens marked the beginning of a new phase in his intellectual journey. He traveled widely, spending time in places like Assos and Lesbos, where he continued his studies. His time away from Athens allowed him to further develop his ideas, particularly in the natural sciences. Aristotle's commitment to empirical observation grew stronger during this period. He conducted extensive research on marine life, which would later form the basis of some of his most important biological works. His time spent studying the natural world was crucial in shaping his scientific methodology. Aristotle's divergence from Plato's idealism did not diminish his intellectual legacy. In fact, it set him on a path that would lead to the creation of a new school of thought, distinct from that of his teacher. Part 3. Founding the Lyceum. In 343 BCE, Aristotle was called back to Macedon by King Philip II. The king requested that Aristotle tutor his son, Alexander, who would later be known as Alexander the Great. Aristotle's time as Alexander's tutor was significant not only because of his influence on one of history's greatest military leaders, but also because it solidified his connection to the Macedonian court. This relationship would provide him with the resources and support necessary to pursue his intellectual endeavors in the years to come. After tutoring Alexander for several years, Aristotle returned to Athens in 335 BCE. Upon his return, he founded his own school, the Lyceum. The Lyceum differed significantly from Plato's Academy. While the Academy focused more on theoretical and abstract discussions, the Lyceum emphasized empirical research and the study of the natural world. Aristotle's scientific interests were evident in the structure of the Lyceum. His school was not just a place for philosophical debate, but also a center for research and observation. Aristotle and his students would walk through the gardens of the Lyceum, discussing philosophy and conducting experiments. This method of teaching earned them the name peripatetics, from the Greek word for walking, peripatetikos. The Lyceum became a hub of intellectual activity in Athens. Aristotle's curriculum covered a wide range of subjects, including biology, physics, ethics, politics, and logic. His holistic approach to education reflected his belief that all knowledge was interconnected. At the Lyceum, Aristotle cultivated a spirit of inquiry that encouraged his students to observe, question, and seek answers from the world around them. His emphasis on empirical research and observation set the Lyceum apart from other schools in Greece. Aristotle's founding of the Lyceum marked a significant moment in the history of education and philosophy. It represented a shift from the more abstract, theoretical teachings of Plato's Academy to a more practical, evidence-based approach to knowledge. The Lyceum attracted scholars from all over the Greek world, and its influence spread far beyond Athens. Through his school, Aristotle laid the groundwork for many of the scientific and philosophical disciplines that would develop in the centuries to come. His commitment to studying the natural world and understanding its principles through observation became one of the cornerstones of his legacy. Part 4. Aristotle's scientific method. One of Aristotle's most enduring contributions to human knowledge is his development of an early form of the scientific method. Unlike his teacher Plato, who believed in the primacy of abstract reasoning, Aristotle was deeply committed to empirical observation. He believed that knowledge of the world could only be gained through careful study of its phenomena. For Aristotle, science began with the collection of data from the natural world. He emphasized the importance of inductive reasoning, where general principles are derived from the observation of particular instances. You said, continue. ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. Through this inductive approach, Aristotle believed that it was possible to uncover universal truths about nature. His method stood in stark contrast to the deductive reasoning favored by earlier philosophers like Plato, who sought to understand the world through abstract contemplation. For Aristotle, the process of discovery began with the senses. He believed that observation of the natural world was the first step in understanding how things worked. Once enough data had been gathered, it could then be organized and classified to form general principles. These principles, in turn, could be tested and refined through further observation and analysis. Aristotle's approach to science was groundbreaking for its time. While earlier thinkers had dabbled in the study of nature, Aristotle was one of the first to develop a systematic method for doing so. His studies of biology, physics, and astronomy were all based on careful observation of the natural world. Aristotle's scientific method was particularly evident in his biological studies. He conducted extensive research on animals, collecting data on their anatomy, behavior, and habitats. His approach was empirical, aiming to understand the underlying principles that governed life. He classified animals based on shared characteristics, which was an early attempt at taxonomy. This system of classification allowed Aristotle to make general statements about groups of animals based on their specific traits. Aristotle's emphasis on observation also extended to other areas of study. In his work on physics, he studied the motion of objects, theorizing about the causes of movement and change. Although many of his conclusions were later proven incorrect, his approach to studying physical phenomena was revolutionary for its time. His observations on the natural world often included descriptions of processes like generation and corruption, which he believed were fundamental to understanding how things came to be and passed away. Aristotle's method of inquiry laid the foundation for much of Western science. His insistence on grounding knowledge in empirical evidence and logical reasoning became the basis for the scientific method used today. Despite the limitations of the technology available to him, Aristotle's scientific investigations were remarkably detailed. He carefully observed the world around him and used these observations to draw conclusions about its workings. His commitment to understanding the natural world through empirical study set him apart from many of his contemporaries. Although some of his theories, such as his views on motion, would later be revised by figures like Galileo and Newton, Aristotle's influence on the development of science was undeniable. His work laid the groundwork for future generations of scientists and philosophers who would build on his methods. Part 5. Contributions to biology. Among Aristotle's many contributions to the world of knowledge, his work in biology stands as one of his most important and influential achievements. Aristotle was fascinated by the diversity of life on Earth. He was the first known thinker to conduct detailed studies of living organisms and to attempt a systematic classification of animals. His interest in biology began early in his career, and he spent many years studying animals in different parts of the Greek world. His biological research included the observation of marine life, birds, insects, and mammals, making Aristotle one of the first naturalists in recorded history. Aristotle's method of studying animals was meticulous. He collected information from a wide variety of sources, including his own observations, the observations of others, and descriptions from travelers and fishermen. He paid particular attention to anatomy, dissection, and the internal structures of animals. This was no small feat in ancient times, as scientific tools and techniques for studying biology were quite limited. Nevertheless, Aristotle's observations were incredibly detailed, and his descriptions of animal behavior and physical characteristics remained influential for centuries. One of Aristotle's key contributions to biology was his classification of animals into distinct groups. He divided animals into those that had blood and those that did not, which roughly corresponded to what we now call vertebrates and invertebrates. His classification system, though rudimentary compared to modern taxonomy, was a significant step forward in understanding the diversity of life. Aristotle's biological studies were not just limited to animal classification. He also observed and theorized about reproduction, embryology, and the life cycles of different species. One of his most famous works, The History of Animals, contains detailed descriptions of hundreds of different species. This text is considered one of the first comprehensive biological surveys in history. In it, Aristotle described the characteristics of various animals, their habitats, and their behavior. He also discussed the relationships between different species and how they interacted with their environments. Aristotle's work in biology extended beyond individual species. He was also interested in the interconnectedness of life and the broader ecosystems in which animals lived. His observations of food chains, predator-prey relationships, and the impact of environmental changes on species were early examples of ecological thinking. Aristotle's ability to connect the study of individual organisms to broader systems of life demonstrated his holistic approach to understanding nature. Though some of Aristotle's conclusions were later disproven, such as his belief in spontaneous generation, the idea that life could arise from non-living matter, His methods were groundbreaking. His empirical approach to studying biology, which involved observing the natural world and forming theories based on evidence, set a precedent for future generations of naturalists and scientists. Part 6. Ethics and the concept of the golden mean. In addition to his scientific inquiries, Aristotle made substantial contributions to the field of ethics. His work in this area is perhaps best exemplified by his concept of the golden mean. Aristotle's ethical philosophy was centered around the idea that virtue lies in finding a balance between two extremes. This concept, known as the golden mean, is a recurring theme throughout Aristotle's ethical writings. He believed that for each virtue there were two opposing vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. For instance, courage, in Aristotle's view, was the mean between recklessness, excess, and cowardice, deficiency. Similarly, generosity was the mean between prodigality and stinginess. Aristotle's ethical philosophy is most fully developed in his work Nicomachean Ethics. This text, named after Aristotle's son, Nicomachus, outlines his theory of virtue and the role it plays in achieving the good life. Aristotle believed that the ultimate goal of human life is eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or happiness. However, for Aristotle, happiness was not simply a fleeting emotion or a state of pleasure. It was a long-term state of living well and fulfilling one's potential as a human being. According to Aristotle, the way to achieve eudaimonia was by living a life of virtue. Virtue, in turn, was developed through habituation. Aristotle argued that individuals could cultivate virtuous habits through repeated practice. Just as one becomes a skilled musician by practicing their instrument, one becomes a virtuous person by practicing virtuous actions. Aristotle's ethical theory was deeply practical. He rejected the idea that virtue could be achieved simply by understanding philosophical principles. Instead, he believed that virtue had to be lived out in the real world. This practical approach to ethics made Aristotle's philosophy distinct from that of his teacher Plato, who often focused on more abstract and idealistic notions of the good life. Aristotle's concept of the golden mean also reflected his belief that moral decisions were rarely black and white. Instead, they required careful consideration of the circumstances and the application of reason to find the right balance. Aristotle's ethical writings had a profound influence on later philosophical thought, particularly in the development of virtue ethics. His emphasis on character, rather than strict rules or consequences, became a cornerstone of ethical theory for centuries to come. Aristotle's ideas about the golden mean continue to resonate with modern readers, as they offer a nuanced approach to moral decision-making. The flexibility of Aristotle's ethical framework allows it to be applied to a wide variety of situations. Whether in personal relationships, professional life, or public policy, Aristotle's concept of the golden mean provides a way to navigate the complexities of human life by seeking balance and moderation. You said. Continue. ChatGPT said. ChatGPT. Aristotle's ethical philosophy also extended beyond the individual, encompassing the broader community. He believed that ethics was not just about personal virtue, but also about how one related to others and participated in the life of the polis, or city-state. In this sense, Aristotle viewed ethics and politics as deeply intertwined. The virtuous person, in his view, was also a good citizen, contributing to the welfare of the community. He argued that the best life is lived in accordance with reason, which involves not only pursuing one's own good, but also the common good. This communal aspect of Aristotle's ethics highlights the importance of social and political engagement in achieving eudaimonia. A good life, according to Aristotle, could not be lived in isolation. It required active participation in society and the cultivation of relationships based on mutual respect and virtue. In Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle also explored the concept of friendship, which he considered an essential component of the good life. He classified friendship into three types: friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of virtue. Friendships of utility are based on mutual benefit, such as business partnerships. Friendships of pleasure arise from the enjoyment of each other's company, as in social or recreational contexts. However, Aristotle believed that the highest form of friendship is one based on virtue, where both individuals admire and respect each other's moral character. These virtuous friendships, Aristotle argued, contribute significantly to one's happiness and well-being. Friendship, like virtue, requires time and effort to cultivate. Aristotle emphasized that true friendships of virtue are rare and take years to develop. They are not based on fleeting emotions or temporary benefits, but on a deep, mutual appreciation for each other's character. Such friendships, according to Aristotle, are enduring and contribute to both individuals' moral growth. In this way, Aristotle saw friendship as an integral part of the good life, reinforcing his broader ethical vision of a life lived in balance and harmony with others. Part 7. Politics and the Ideal State. In addition to his contributions to ethics, Aristotle also developed a comprehensive political theory. In his work Politics, Aristotle examined different forms of government and proposed what he believed to be the best system for promoting the common good. For Aristotle, the state exists not simply to provide for the material needs of its citizens, but to help them achieve virtue and live fulfilling lives. He argued that politics is an extension of ethics because the goal of the state is to cultivate the virtues necessary for the good life. In Aristotle's view, the state plays a crucial role in shaping the character of its citizens through laws, education, and civic engagement. Aristotle classified governments into 6 types based on whether they served the common good or the interests of the rulers. The 3 good forms of government, according to Aristotle, were monarchy, rule by one, aristocracy, rule by the few, and polity, rule by the many. These forms of government, when properly executed, aimed to benefit all citizens. On the other hand, the 3 bad forms of government, tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy, arose when rulers prioritized their own interests over those of the people. Aristotle was particularly critical of democracy, which he defined as rule by the poor majority at the expense of the wealthy minority. However, it is important to note that Aristotle's concept of democracy was different from modern democratic systems. His criticism was rooted in the idea that democracy, as practiced in ancient Greece, often led to mob rule and instability. Despite his reservations about pure democracy, Aristotle did not advocate for an elitist or authoritarian system. Instead, he believed that the best government was one that balanced the interests of different social groups. His ideal government, known as a constitutional polity, combined elements of democracy and oligarchy. In a constitutional polity, both the rich and the poor had a say in governance, but neither group dominated. Aristotle believed that this balance would create stability and promote the common good. Aristotle's political philosophy was also deeply concerned with the role of education in shaping citizens. He argued that the state should be responsible for providing education that promotes virtue and reason. In Politics, he outlined a curriculum for civic education that included subjects like music, gymnastics, and philosophy. Aristotle believed that education was not just about imparting knowledge, but about cultivating the moral and intellectual virtues necessary for good citizenship. By educating its citizens in this way, the state could ensure that they would contribute to the welfare of the community and lead virtuous lives. Aristotle's political thought was influential in shaping later ideas about government and citizenship. His belief in the importance of balance and moderation in governance, as well as his emphasis on the role of education in promoting virtue, had a lasting impact on Western political theory. Although his ideal of a constitutional polity was never fully realized in his time, it anticipated many of the principles that would later inform the development of modern democratic systems. Part 8. Contributions to Logic and Syllogism. Aristotle's work in logic is one of his most enduring legacies. He is often referred to as the father of logic because of his systematic study of reasoning and argumentation. Before Aristotle, there had been no formal discipline dedicated to the study of logic, although earlier thinkers like the sophists had used rhetorical techniques to construct persuasive arguments. Aristotle, however, sought to develop a more rigorous and structured approach to reasoning. His work on logic is collected in a series of texts known as the Organon, which laid the foundation for the study of logic for centuries. At the heart of Aristotle's logical system is the syllogism. A syllogism is a form of deductive reasoning in which a conclusion is drawn from 2 premises. For example, in the classic syllogism, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. The conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. Aristotle's development of the syllogism was a major breakthrough in the study of logic. It provided a framework for analyzing arguments and determining whether they were valid. Aristotle identified different types of syllogisms and explored their various forms, creating a comprehensive system for deductive reasoning. In addition to syllogistic reasoning, Aristotle also developed principles for analyzing different types of propositions and their relationships. He introduced the concept of contradiction, where a proposition and its negation cannot both be true. For example, the propositions Socrates is a man and Socrates is not a man are contradictory and cannot both be true at the same time. Aristotle also explored the concept of the middle term in syllogistic reasoning, which connects the two premises to the conclusion. In the syllogism, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. The middle term is man, which appears in both premises and links them logically. Aristotle's contributions to logic extended beyond deductive reasoning. He also studied inductive reasoning, where general principles are derived from specific observations. For example, after observing that all swans seen so far are white, one might conclude that all swans are white. Although inductive reasoning is not as certain as deductive reasoning, Aristotle recognized its importance in scientific inquiry. His emphasis on both types of reasoning reflects his broader commitment to understanding how knowledge is acquired and validated. Aristotle's work on logic had a profound impact on the development of Western philosophy and science. His system of deductive reasoning became the standard method for analyzing arguments in philosophy, mathematics, and the natural sciences. For centuries, Aristotle's logic was the foundation of the Western educational curriculum, particularly in medieval universities. It wasn't until the development of modern symbolic logic in the 19th century that Aristotle's system was significantly revised. Nevertheless, his contributions to the study of reasoning remain foundational to the field of logic. Part 9. Aristotle's influence on medieval thought. After Aristotle's death in 322 BCE, much of his work was lost to the Western world. However, his writings were preserved and translated by scholars in the Islamic world during the Middle Ages. This preservation was crucial in ensuring that Aristotle's ideas would survive and influence later generations of thinkers. During the Islamic Golden Age, scholars such as Avicenna and Averroes wrote extensive commentaries on Aristotle's works, particularly in the fields of logic, metaphysics, and ethics. These scholars not only preserved Aristotle's texts but also expanded on his ideas, integrating them with Islamic philosophy and theology. Their commentaries and interpretations of Aristotle's works played a crucial role in the transmission of Aristotelian thought to medieval Europe. In the 12th century, Aristotle's works were rediscovered in the West, largely through translations from Arabic into Latin. This period, known as the Latin Renaissance, marked the reintroduction of Aristotle into the intellectual life of Europe. His writings became central to the development of scholasticism, the dominant method of learning in medieval universities. One of the key figures responsible for integrating Aristotle's philosophy into medieval thought was Thomas Aquinas, the Dominican friar and theologian. Aquinas sought to harmonize Aristotle's philosophy with Christian doctrine, particularly in his Summa Theologica. He adopted Aristotle's ideas about nature, ethics, and metaphysics, while also adapting them to fit within a Christian framework. For instance, Aquinas used Aristotle's concept of the unmoved mover to support the idea of God as the first cause of all things. In doing so, Aquinas helped to establish Aristotle as a central figure in Christian theology. This synthesis of Aristotelian philosophy and Christian theology became the cornerstone of medieval scholasticism, influencing not only theology but also fields like logic, ethics, and natural philosophy. Aristotle's influence extended beyond theology into the broader intellectual life of the Middle Ages. His works on logic, particularly the Organon, became essential texts in the medieval university curriculum. Students were trained in Aristotelian logic as the foundation for all other forms of learning. This focus on logic and reasoning helped to shape the intellectual rigor of medieval scholarship. Aristotle's politics and ethics were also widely studied, and his ideas about virtue and the good life had a significant impact on medieval conceptions of morality and governance. Aristotle's ideas were not without controversy during the medieval period. Some church authorities were wary of his naturalistic explanations for phenomena, which sometimes seemed to conflict with Christian doctrine. For example, Aristotle's belief in the eternity of the universe contradicted the Christian teaching of creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing. However, through figures like Aquinas, these tensions were largely reconciled, and Aristotle's philosophy became a key part of the intellectual life of the medieval Christian world. His influence on medieval thought was so profound that by the 13th century, Aristotle was known simply as the philosopher in European academic circles. His works were seen as the ultimate authority on many subjects, from logic and metaphysics to ethics and politics. The rediscovery of Aristotle's works in medieval Europe also laid the groundwork for the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. Thinkers like Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, and Isaac Newton, although they would eventually challenge some of Aristotle's scientific ideas, were still deeply influenced by his methods of inquiry. Aristotle's emphasis on observation, classification, and logical reasoning would continue to shape scientific thought for centuries to come. Part 10. Aristotle's legacy and influence on modern thought. Aristotle's legacy has endured for more than 2 millennia, and his influence on modern thought remains profound. His work laid the foundation for many disciplines, including biology, ethics, logic, and political theory. In the centuries following the Middle Ages, Aristotle's ideas continued to be studied, debated, and built upon by philosophers and scientists alike. His commitment to empirical observation and logical reasoning helped to shape the scientific method, which became the cornerstone of modern science. Although many of his scientific theories, such as his understanding of physics, were later revised or disproven, the methods he used to reach those conclusions, observation, classification, and systematic reasoning, remained influential. In the realm of philosophy, Aristotle's ideas about metaphysics, ethics, and politics have continued to resonate throughout history. His Nicomachean Ethics remains a foundational text in the study of virtue ethics. Modern virtue ethicists like Alasdair MacIntyre have drawn on Aristotle's ideas to argue for the importance of character and moral development in ethical theory. Aristotle's concept of the golden mean, which advocates for moderation in all things, is still considered a valuable framework for moral decision-making. In political theory, Aristotle's politics has had a lasting impact. His analysis of different forms of government and his emphasis on the importance of balancing the interests of different social groups influenced the development of modern political thought. Although Aristotle was critical of democracy as it existed in ancient Greece, many of his ideas about constitutional government and the role of the state in promoting the common good have shaped modern democratic systems. His belief in the importance of education and civic engagement for fostering a virtuous citizenry remains relevant in contemporary discussions about the role of government in society. Aristotle's contributions to logic also continue to influence modern philosophy and mathematics. His development of the syllogism as a tool for deductive reasoning laid the foundation for formal logic, which would later evolve into modern symbolic logic. Although symbolic logic, developed in the 19th and 20th centuries by figures like George Boole and Gottlob Frege, represents a significant departure from Aristotle's original system, the principles of deductive reasoning that Aristotle established are still fundamental to the field. Beyond philosophy and science, Aristotle's influence can be seen in the arts, literature, and education. His Poetics, a work on literary theory, introduced the concept of dramatic structure and the importance of catharsis in tragedy. These ideas have had a lasting impact on the study of literature and drama, influencing playwrights from Shakespeare to contemporary screenwriters. In education, Aristotle's emphasis on cultivating reason and virtue through a balanced curriculum has informed educational theory for centuries. His holistic approach to learning, which integrated physical, intellectual, and moral education, continues to inspire modern educational practices. Aristotle's legacy is not just a matter of historical interest. His ideas continue to provide a framework for understanding and engaging with the world today. In an age where empirical observation, logical reasoning, and the search for ethical and political balance are as important as ever, Aristotle's philosophy remains relevant. His works offer timeless insights into the nature of knowledge, the pursuit of virtue, and the structure of society. Aristotle's ability to integrate diverse areas of inquiry, from biology and ethics to politics and logic, into a coherent system of thought has ensured his place as one of the most influential figures in the history of human thought. His legacy endures not only in the ideas that continue to shape modern philosophy and science, but also in the methods of inquiry he championed. Through observation, reason, and the search for truth, Aristotle's intellectual journey continues to inspire scholars, scientists, and thinkers around the world. Aristotle's influence on Western thought is so extensive that it is difficult to imagine the development of philosophy, science, or political theory without him. His commitment to understanding the world through empirical observation and logical analysis set a standard that has guided generations of thinkers. Today, as we continue to grapple with questions about the nature of reality, the the structure of society, and the meaning of the good life, Aristotle's philosophy remains an indispensable resource for exploring these timeless questions. Aristotle's thought is a living tradition, not just a relic of the past. His works are still studied in universities and schools around the world, and his ideas continue to inspire new generations of scholars, philosophers, scientists, and policymakers. One of the reasons for this enduring relevance is the breadth and depth of Aristotle's intellectual pursuits. He did not confine himself to a single field of study, but instead sought to understand the interconnectedness of all areas of human knowledge. This holistic approach allows his ideas to be applied across a wide range of disciplines, from biology and ethics to politics and metaphysics. In the field of ethics, for instance, Aristotle's virtue ethics provides a valuable counterpoint to the more rule-based ethical theories that dominate contemporary moral philosophy, such as utilitarianism and deontology. Whereas utilitarianism focuses on the consequences of actions and deontology emphasizes adherence to moral rules, Aristotle's virtue ethics encourages individuals to cultivate good character traits and to live in accordance with reason. This focus on personal development and moral character resonates with many people today, as it offers a more nuanced and human-centered approach to ethics. In modern political theory, Aristotle's emphasis on the role of the state in promoting the common good continues to influence debates about the purpose and structure of government. His idea that the state exists not only to protect citizens' rights, but also to help them achieve virtue and live flourishing lives, has been echoed in contemporary discussions about the role of the welfare state, public education, and social services. Aristotle's concept of balancing the interests of different social groups is also reflected in modern democratic systems, where governments strive to represent the interests of all citizens, rather than just the wealthy or powerful. Aristotle's influence on science, particularly his approach to observation and classification, laid the groundwork for the empirical methods that would later dominate the scientific revolution. Although many of his specific scientific theories were later revised or overturned, his insistence on grounding knowledge in observation and logical reasoning remains a fundamental principle of scientific inquiry. His work in biology, for example, while limited by the tools and knowledge of his time, set a precedent for the careful observation and classification of living organisms, which continues to be a cornerstone of biological sciences today. In addition to his contributions to ethics, politics, and science, Aristotle's work in metaphysics has continued to shape philosophical thought for centuries. His exploration of concepts like substance, causality, and potentiality versus actuality has influenced countless philosophers, from medieval scholastics to modern existentialists. Aristotle's idea that everything in the natural world has a purpose, or telos, has been a subject of ongoing debate, particularly in discussions about the nature of existence and the meaning of life. Aristotle's Poetics, his work on literary theory, has had a lasting impact on the way we understand narrative and drama. His analysis of tragedy, with its focus on plot structure, character development, and catharsis, continues to inform the way stories are crafted in literature, theatre, and film. The idea that a well-constructed narrative can lead to a purging of emotions, or catharsis, has been explored by writers, directors, and critics for centuries. Aristotle's insights into the nature of storytelling remain relevant in today's entertainment industry, where the power of narrative to move and transform audiences is as strong as ever. Aristotle's educational philosophy, which emphasized the importance of a well-rounded education that develops both the mind and body, has had a profound influence on educational theory. His belief that education should foster moral and intellectual virtues, as well as practical skills, continues to inform contemporary discussions about the purpose of education. Many modern educational systems, particularly those that emphasize liberal arts education, draw on Aristotle's holistic approach to learning, which integrates different areas of knowledge and encourages students to think critically about the world around them. As we look to the future, Aristotle's ideas offer valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. His emphasis on balance and moderation, whether in ethics, politics, or personal life, provides a framework for addressing the complexities of modern life. In an increasingly polarized world, Aristotle's philosophy reminds us of the importance of seeking a middle ground and striving for harmony in our personal and collective lives. His belief in the power of reason and education to shape individuals and societies for the better is a message that continues to resonate as we grapple with issues ranging from environmental sustainability to social justice. Aristotle's influence on modern thought is not just a matter of intellectual history. It is a living tradition that continues to inspire and guide our understanding of the world. His commitment to understanding the natural world through empirical observation and logical reasoning set the stage for the scientific advances of the modern era. His exploration of ethics, politics, and metaphysics continues to shape the way we think about human nature, society, and the universe. Aristotle's ability to integrate diverse areas of inquiry into a coherent system of thought has ensured his place as one of the most influential thinkers in human history. In conclusion, Aristotle's legacy is one of enduring relevance and profound influence. His work laid the foundation for many of the intellectual traditions that continue to shape our world today. From the development of the scientific method to the study of ethics, politics, and metaphysics, Aristotle's ideas have had a lasting impact on philosophy, science, and culture. His holistic approach to knowledge, which emphasized the interconnectedness of all areas of inquiry, offers a valuable model for addressing the complex challenges of the modern world. Whether we are studying the natural world, exploring the nature of existence, or striving to live virtuous lives, Aristotle's philosophy provides a framework for understanding and engaging with the world in a meaningful way. His contributions to human thought have stood the test of time, and his influence will continue. If you enjoyed exploring the past and learning how it shapes our present, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next adventure.